I'm not really going to be very conventional in this talk. I think you've had an enormous amount of very, very good information and some very good presentations and some really good food for thought. So we're going to be a little bit more participatory now, and I will do my best to try not to embarrass you too much. I'm going to start off by just giving you a little bit of a rundown of what I'm going to try and do. First of all, I'm going to talk you through what I feel is the tragicomedy of sanitation. Therefore, hopefully, will make you laugh a little bit and cry a little bit. We're going to visit India, Nepal, and we're going to we're going to carry on your trip that you did yesterday in Victorian London. So we're going to do a moonlit river ride up the Thames some time back. Can I just ask, how many people went on the walk? It's safe to put your hands up at this stage, that you're not volunteering for anything too dangerous. Okay. What was the key take home from the walk? Did anybody got some key message they want to share with the group? Yeah. Women had it really tough. And I gather that a lot of the public toilets had to be closed down during the suffragette movement because the suffragette women used to hide in the women's toilets, so they very quickly closed them down to stop them hiding. Thanks for that. Okay, so going to take you on a little bit of a tour. I think Anna's already remembered one of the particular tragedies in sanitation that's happened recently, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some other tragedies. I will also try and suggest that something that I think has also come across quite strongly, that investment in infrastructure must reflect the needs of women, particularly the poor, vulnerable and disenfranchised women. And I wonder also whether actually collectively we sell wash short, that actually, you know, if we're really going to do a service to families, whether we should recognize that it costs a lot more than we are currently willing to invest. And at DFID, constantly decisions and choices are being made about how to invest in different things. And I just wonder whether, you know, the advertising has got it a little bit wrong, where we're going, you know, for just $20, we can provide a family with water for such and such, or for just $10 we can provide a family with a latrine, when actually what we've just been hearing about functionality and sustainability really means that it's a lot more expensive than that to really provide a sustainable system. And we haven't even mentioned how tricky it is to really sustain behavior change, what the big cost of that is. So another little embarrassment moment. We've talked a lot about open defecation. I just wondered whether anybody here has found themselves in the position where they've been forced to practice open defecation. Very good. You see, it's quite a lot of us, really. And it was interesting that that's both men and women who are putting their hands up. And I think one of the things that Anna was alluding to was the awful situation for Pushpa and Murti in Uttar Pradesh, where, as she was mentioning, they had to go out. They didn't have a toilet at home. And so we are in a particularly privileged position, not generally having to do that. And I think one of the key things that our chair of the morning used to talk about was how latrines could at least provide women freedom from imprisonment by daylight, but also freedom from the threats faced at night going out. And I think that's a key lesson this week, and it certainly came home to me very strongly. I've just come back from Nepal, and this is my next trip for you to come with me to the Terai district. And there in and this is me providing you with a natural link into the next section of this very good day. We went to visit a cholera camp. And here the situation was bizarre because the village, 5,000 people, had a water source which was coming out of rivers with a filtration system coming from springs, but it was being damaged, not just by the water buffaloes, but also by people that wanted the water for irrigating their vegetables. But not surprisingly, the most vulnerable communities, the ones that were most distant from the source itself, were the ones that were suffering most, and the ones that were least likely to be able to get their water. So picture the Cholera Camp. It's a school. The kids are lying on the benches, and their mothers, their carers, are holding the drips up. So they've got a drip for rehydration, and they've got a drip with the antibiotic. And it's pretty grubby. It's pretty bad in this place. And amazingly, they haven't lost anybody. I mean, I'm sure we're going to hear about cholera a little bit later on, and I'm sure lots of you in here have experienced what cholera can do. But it was miraculous that they hadn't actually lost. They'd treated 100 kids in the last month. And they can't resolve the water problem because it's very politically charged. What the elders are wanting is a groundwater source, overhead tank, reticulated system. They don't want another bodged system which is constantly being sabotaged by human or bovine activity. So very tricky, and unfortunately the kids lying on the school benches in the cholera camp are actually the pawns in what is a political game. So it's a very complex system. We talk about how some of the technical solutions, but we mustn't forget the political aspects as well. So, good stories from Nepal. We moved on to the next place, which was a village development area which had just recently declared itself open defecation free. And great working model for people there. They'd used mass combination of different approaches, and some of you will be very familiar with the school-led total sanitation, community-led total sanitation, sanitation marketing, village drama, school health clubs, kids going house to house, kids using slightly draconian measures like blowing whistles when they see somebody crapping outside, sticking a flag in a bit of shit when they see it, doing various things to embarrass people into changing their action. But I think one of the things which really brought it home for me was the fact that very successfully they'd managed to do something which I've not seen before, which was to get the latrine actually inside people's houses. And of course, given what we've just been talking about in terms of the threat to women, this clearly was a major priority in this area, and they'd managed to do an offset latrine. I mean, it's a pour flush latrine with the actual slab and the pan inside, in the corner of the house, partitioned off, and the obviously the soakaway or septic tank outside the house. And obviously there are still problems. We talked about the proximity of septic tanks or pit latrines to water sources and things like that. But suddenly you're actually resolving a major problem that women are facing. They're actually safe. They actually got the latrine inside. So that was a really dramatic thing to see. I think the other thing, which is an interesting one, we've had a lot of criticism about our support for the Gurkha Welfare Service, but in fact, they're doing a lot of innovative work, and one of the things that they're also doing is they are recognizing that it's not enough to provide a water source 500 meters or more from people's homes. They're actually saying enough is enough. We've got to charge the right amount. We've got to get this water inside people's homes. And I don't think any of us would deny the importance of extending that water source, safe water source, to people's homes. We know it helps to improve the hygiene levels. We know that it makes life much, much easier for women folk particularly. And we know very well that it's at the moment seen as being beyond our financial means. And this is coming back to my theme of us selling ourselves short. You know, for so long we've said we can do wash for $50, $60, $70 a head. But actually, we're not really doing it, are we? We're still providing what is a little bit like an emergency service for people. And we're expecting that to be all right. And, you know, when we come to the sort of the debate about neglected tropical diseases, I found myself getting quite uptight about the idea that we're spending so much money on trying to eradicate the last cases of guinea worm. Now, I know the NTD community will probably sort of start throwing things at me, but I just felt that, here we are, we're not even providing basic levels of sanitation, hygiene, and water supply, and we're spending so much money on that. We're spending so much money on other things. How do we alter that prioritization? Now, that's just me speaking. That's not an official government line. Okay, so I'm now going to take us back a bit. I want you, those that didn't go on the tour of Victorian London, the loos, I want you to just try and imagine that you are back in Victorian London, and those that went on the walk yesterday will have been introduced to the ghost, at least, of Sir Joseph William Bazalgette, the 19th century English engineer whose job it was to try and address the problems that were faced by people then. And of course, the Great Stink of 1858. Anybody can tell me what the Great Stink of 1858 was? Any volunteers? Yes. It's not fair. It's a professor. He knows the Great Stink. Okay, he's lecturing on the Great Stink. Yes. That's right. They couldn't. They were stunk out. You're quite right. So they actually passed an enabling act, which suddenly granted Bazalgette £4.5 million to do something about it. What was quite interesting was there was a little bit of legislation before that which had actually banned what were septic tanks or soakaways because they were overflowing into the streets, and everyone was then asked to redirect all their sewage into the Thames. Now, the point that I'm going to make is that Bazalgette had a limited amount of money, and as you know, he did the most amazing job. What are the stats here? He built 132 kilometers of underground brick sewers, and he did 1,800 kilometers of street sewers, okay? Now, the thing was that he only had a limited amount of money, so he could only move this down as far as the outflows just beyond Barking. And this brings me to this next bit of participation that I'm going to ask. I'm offering you the chance to go on this moonlit river ride, okay? It's only 2 shillings in old money, old English money. Any volunteers? Who would like to go on this river trip? It's a chance to see the gardens down at Gravesend. It's a very nice trip. Any show of hands? Anybody like to go on the trip? It's a fictitious trip, unfortunately. Sorry. Thank you for pointing that out. I could have had an embarrassing number of people say, "Oi, where's my ticket?" So I've got 1 volunteer, 2 volunteers, 3, 4. Any more? Please, show of hands. Who'd like to go on this trip down to Gravesend? Well, some people probably already know that this is not a good plan and not a good idea. And it's true, unfortunately. It's actually a really very, very sad story, because what happened was the Princess Alice had gone down, people had had a lovely time, turned around, coming back up. And just before it got to one of the landing points near Woolwich Terminal, it collided with a collier ship coming down the other way. And it was split in half and it sank very quickly. Now, there probably would have been a chance of survival, but unfortunately, at the same time, the outflows had just deposited their, let me just give you the right amount, 75 million imperial gallons of raw sewage into the Thames. So you can imagine, absolutely no chance for the people who were trying to swim for their survival. So in fact, 658 people perished. So I'm really sorry that, or rather you're probably not sorry that there wasn't a chance to get on that ship. So my point is, sanitation is no laughing matter. It's very, very difficult for us to make priorities. I mean, Bazalgette obviously had a limited amount of money. He couldn't take that outflow further down. But the issue about making sure that women are involved in the technical choices, for me, is fundamental. About protecting women as well is pretty fundamental to the whole process. How do we actually make that possible? And I think there are some really good models out there. There's some very, very clever, innovative approaches. But I think that, for me, is the take-home, that we've got to make sure that women are allowed to feel safe in one of the most basic acts known to humankind. Okay, thanks very much, everybody.